I'm Monique Power. I'm the founder and co-director of Rippleability, with this lovely lady here with the phone pointing in my face. We're a paediatric disability support service, and we operate out of the Peel region down in the Southern Corridor. I just want to start by giving an acknowledgement to country to say thank you to the traditional custodians of the land and those past, present and emerging. We're here today to talk about a change in legislation, so it's quite nice to come off the back of the panel that came before lunch, talking about how does real change happen in this space. And coming from a political background, I do see a lot of value in the opportunity to get in front of politicians and say, there's a problem and it's on you to change it, but it does come from us. We have to drive that change from the bottom up, and we're big believers in that. So why Rippleability? This gorgeous little girl you can see on the screen is my little girl. She was born with complex disability and medical needs. And I found out at 20 weeks gestation that she wasn't going to live a normal life. And she definitely has thrown every single curveball under the sun at me. And she changed the trajectory of my life forever. And she's the inspiration behind the founding of Rippleability. My daughter, Emmy Lou, has complex medical needs that affect her skeletal system, her cardiac system, her respiratory system, her gastric system, and her limbs. And they're quite significant. And as you can probably see by the pictures, in many regards, they're invisible, which makes it really difficult as her carer to express what her needs are and to express what my needs were. And I learned firsthand in my process as being her mum how difficult it was to navigate the systems and to be her advocate on a day-to-day basis. And I know that that's going to continue forever. And everyone in this room who is a carer does understand just how hard it is to bash your head against a system that isn't working for you continuously. And it's really exhausting. It's mentally taxing. And unfortunately, the onus has always been put on us to make the change. And we need to say, hang on a second, this is my life, but you need to do something about that. And I do agree with everything that's been said so far. We do have that voice and we do have the obligation to share it, because you don't know what you don't know, and we know a lot, so we should be telling everyone. Like I said, I came from a political background, so I do understand how politics works. I understand how to read legislation and interpret all of their fancy words. And I myself really struggled with my daughter because she had a complex medical disability, and it is lifelong. When she was under one, I lost her 5 times before she was 14 months old. And I remember sitting in the hospital after ringing the NDIS and filling out all of their forms and thinking, yeah, I'm doing all right here. I'd lost her. And they brought her back to me. And I was sitting in the ED room when I got a call saying, you've been unsuccessful. And I thought, why am I unsuccessful? I plug my daughter into a machine every night when she goes to sleep, and every day when she falls asleep for a nap, so that she can wake up from that, because her esophagus was collapsing and she was stopping breathing on a regular basis. So I was doing that. She didn't eat properly. She didn't sleep properly. She didn't communicate properly. And it was consistent. And yes, I was her mum, and yes, she was under one, and yes, I needed to do those things anyway because I was a parent, but it was excessive. It was over and above, and I knew that, but I couldn't get the system to see it. It happened a second time. I'd lost her again. I was in the ED, and they called me and said, we need more information. Can you please go back to the specialist? Can you please get more forms? Can you please get more? And I just thought, I just don't have it in me to get you more. I'm sitting here, I've been here 5 days. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. They're running tests. I've got no idea what's going on with my daughter. You sort it out. That's a you problem. But no, it was a me problem. The third time around, I went back. And the third call was the last call. And it enraged me. My daughter was nearly 2, and she was diagnosed with a childhood disease to boot, on top of her already pre-existing disability. And I just remember thinking, nah, no more. I'm done with this system. And like I said, it lit a fire. It really did. And I went to every politician. I knocked down every door. I went to every system. And I really started screaming and shouting, look at me. I need something different. And I knew then that I wasn't on my own. And coming from my background, I had an obligation to help families. And so Claire and I started Rippleability for families like mine. Now, the NDIS preaches and preaches that choice and control is at, the heart of everything that we do. And that's all well and good. And you know what? I am grateful that we have the NDIS. So I'm not going to stand and mock it, because it's good that we do have it. But is the system perfect? By God, no, not at all. It is, we can probably collectively agree it's pretty outrageous, and a lot of changes need to happen, and that needs to happen pretty fast. But they preach that choice and control is at the heart of what they do, but what about the carers? What about us that have this obligation through love, or whether it was thrust on us, or for whatever reason that might be? This is our life forever. And if they don't look after us, how can we look after the people that we love and the people that we care for? Now, I'm here today to talk about something very specific. There exists a systemic issue in Australia around access to childcare for children with profound disability and severe medical complexity under the age of 5. In our current system at the moment, if you have a child born with a disability, the systems all look at you and say, sorry, which is not a sorry, and we've heard that before. We're not sorry. They're our kids. We bloody love them, and like that lady said, we're not going to swab them for anything. But the system says the onus is on you. You can't go to childcare because the services aren't set up for you. So I'm really sorry, they're going to have to stay at home. And the NDIS says, but every parent has a responsibility to look after their child, so why should we give you money to do that? Okay, well, thank you so much. So that's another system where you hit a loggerhead. And it's continuous and it continues to happen. But right now, those children are forgotten. Children are falling through the gaps and families are struggling under the weight of it. So what are the services that exist? Well, we've got subsidised mainstream childcare. We've got children's hospices. We've got the family care support centres. We've got private childcare. And of course, we've got the NDIS and the early childhood models. And all of these are great within their own right, and they work for some people, but they don't work for everybody. Because right now, the mainstream childcare model has insufficient staff training to cater to these kinds of children. They have inadequate facilities. They're not inclusive. You can't just send any child to a daycare facility. And they have a really inflexible fee structure, which means that you're penalised if you have to pull your child out because they have a therapeutic event, or they were just not having a good day, so you're not going to send them. Or you're not having a good day, so you're not going to go out of the house today. You're penalised for not being able to put your child in childcare for 8 hours a day. And all of these reasons make it really difficult to send your child to daycare. So, mainstream childcare facilities. I've got some really cool statistics here, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to look at my paper. At the moment, the childcare subsidy supports 1,328,480 children in Australia. That's a lot of children. And for every 20 of those children, 19 of them are supported, which means that 19 families that send their children to childcare get about up to 85% of that rebated. Up to 85% of their money is paid for by the state or the Commonwealth to send their child to childcare to be able to go to work and do the things that they need to do. 70% of families have an out-of-pocket expense of under $5 an hour. So I have a beautiful 2-year-old who is a whirlwind, and I send her to childcare, and thank God I can send her to childcare because I'm grey and that's why I dye my hair, and she's the reason I'm grey, not my eldest. So I pay less than $5 an hour to send my daughter to childcare every day. I didn't have that opportunity with Emmylou. That didn't exist for me. There was no viable alternative. In the childcare system at the moment, there's one subsidy that you can get, and it's called an inclusion support subsidy. And I'm just going to come out and say it's just inadequate. It's completely insufficient. In order to access this subsidy, you've got to jump through so many government hoops, so much red tape, and what do you get out of the end of it? You get an additional set of hands in the room. That's it. Just one extra person in the room. Does that extra person provide one-to-one support for your child? No, they don't. Can that one person provide medical assistance if your child desperately needs it or even just needs medication to get through the next 24 hours of their day? No, they cannot. Will that person be funded by the NDIS if you don't get this subsidy? No, they're not going to. And can that person transport your child if you can't get them there? No, they're not going to. So what the hell is the inclusion support subsidy? It's a bunch of nothing, really. Now, over 77,000 children under the age of 6 are being funded currently by the National Disability Insurance Scheme. the early childhood approach that they've now decided to rename it again. Now, unfortunately, the NDIS, I said, it is great and we are really grateful to have it. But does it work for everybody? No. And particularly this age bracket, it doesn't work for. In the 0 to 6 age bracket, the majority of the plans, so let's take a national average here. The national average plan amount for this age group is $25,000 for the whole year. $25,000 is the national average. Now, of that, majority of the money, as you would know, is highly concentrated into the therapeutic arm. So good luck trying to get a support worker out of that, because most of us don't get core supports. Which means that if the average Australian family who's accessing childcare gets 30.9 average hours a week to send their child to childcare, we, on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, if we could concentrate all of that $25,000, which we can't, by the way, but if we could, then that would mean that we would get 7.75 hours a week of supported care at the NDIS price guide. So I can send my youngest to childcare all day, every day. See you later, babe, pack your bags. But my eldest one, no, I get 7 hours and I get to use that sparingly. And I have to make that work for me. And I don't get 7 hours because most of that money's sitting over there so I can get a physio, an OT, a speechy and a psych. It's a pretty stark difference. This is Jaden. Jaden's one of our earliest families that we engage with. Jaden is a gorgeous little boy with a very rare diagnosis. When we met Jaden, he had $30,000 in his plan. Now, I'm allowed to share this with you because I have consent from his family. And Jaden doesn't eat independently. He doesn't walk independently. He doesn't communicate on his own. Jaden needs 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for the rest of his life support. $30,000 in Jaden's plan when we met him. $30,000 to get support, $30,000 to get therapy, $30,000 to live a normal life. You tell me, how far do you think $30,000 went? Nowhere. To compound the issue, Jaden comes from a family who have a New Zealand background. So Jaden's mum is a New Zealander, which means that Jaden's mum also couldn't get a carer's allowance or a carer's payment. So she gave up work, she gave up employment, and she became the full-time carer of Jaden, who has an older sister who he absolutely adores. What did that mean for his family? It meant a lot. Jaden couldn't go to childcare. Kelly didn't feel comfortable. Tristan had to go to work. He didn't get a lot of time with his son, didn't get a lot of time with his daughter. It caused a lot of stress, added to a lot of mental implications. And Jaden's story is not unique. It happens over and over again. And it's compounding. You have a child with a disability, you can't get them into childcare, you have no viable solution. You then have to withdraw from work. You become increasingly isolated. It adds additional stress and burden to your family. You have family and relationship breakdown, and the cycle goes on and on and on. What exists in stark contrast? We have the palliative model of care, and it's a beautiful model of care for children and their families living with palliative conditions. The palliative model of care offers so much opportunity for those families, and thank goodness we have this. It's a beautiful model and I've never want to give it up. Where it's different is that in the palliative model of care versus the childcare model and the NDIS model, it is a wraparound support for the family. There are services working in collaboration to make sure that that family and that child are catered for. Everyone's needs and everyone's voices are heard. All the services and supports are made readily available and you don't have to go anywhere. It's brought to you. And what does this mean for the family? They feel connected, they feel heard, and they feel supported. This is Layla. Layla is a beautiful, beautiful little girl, and she is the inspiration behind our creche model. Unfortunately, Layla passed last year, and we attended her funeral. And when we were there, we were sitting in an audience looking around, and what we noticed was that it was unlike any funeral we've ever been to. There were so many children in the room. Some children were being suctioned. Some children had their oxygen being altered during the spot. And there were so many parents that we spoke to after that said, we really didn't want our kids to be here, but what choice did we have? This is Gabby, and Gabby's family went through a lot in trying to get supports for Layla because of her age and because of her diagnosis. It didn't tick any of those boxes that we were talking about. And Layla's family had a lot of support from the palliative care, but there's no way she could have integrated into a mainstream childcare service. So what's the proposed solution? Repellability has been working on looking at how do we collaborate these services and these supports? What does that look like? Why do we have to either have an all or nothing situation? Why can't we have a bit of everything situation? Why can't we amalgamate these services? Why can't we have what feels like a palliative care model for our families, but actually operates like a childcare? And why can't we have a purpose-built facility so that these kids don't have to try to integrate in the instance that they simply cannot because they're immunocompromised, their medical health needs are super profound, and their expertise are just not offered in a mainstream centre? Why can't we have the wraparound opportunities for our families? And why can't we move beyond a non-for-profit model of disability care? We've done a lot of time thinking about, well, what does this centre look like and who needs to be involved in it? And basically, it looks like a centre that is purpose-built and it functions for the families that are engaging with it. It has medical professionals. It has referral systems. It has an opportunity to have nurses and staff that are adequately trained and understand your child and can act with assurance. So when you leave your child there or you decide to stay, you know that they're in really good hands. They're in hands like your own. What are the barriers to this project? Well, the number one barrier is that there doesn't exist a legislation. So we could open the doors to a centre like this tomorrow, but good luck trying to make it affordable. Something like this could happen overnight. It's easy. It's bricks and mortar, a couple of staff, some training. But if the families can't afford it, what is the point? Why can't we have a subsidy that enables these kids to go to childcare? What are the future directions? We currently have a briefing note sitting with the Disability Minister, and we hope that he's going to look at it. And we understand that a bricks and mortar response isn't everything, it's not the be all and the end all, but it will suit some families and it has to exist. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in the childcare centre. There are so many kids that could be captured and could be retained and could be catered for in a mainstream centre, but the system doesn't have the understanding or the knowledge, or sometimes the fear is there from the childcare's perspective. They don't want to take on this child, or a family's just not ready to let go because they don't feel as though their child is going to be adequately cared for. There's a lot of work and a lot of training. So Repellability is working with the general public to co-design what does this look like, and with the childcare system, what do you need to be able to integrate these kids, and how does that look, and how can we make that happen? I just have a video. I'm going to leave it with you before we go to some questions. Thank you, everyone. Just before we go to questions, I just wanted to let you know that we would love to hear your story. We are in the collaborative phase at the moment, and we want to know, how could childcare work for you? What was your experience with it? And what do you think needs to change? And be involved in that process so that we can hopefully see some exciting legislative change in the future and our kids won't be forgotten. We have these beautiful QR codes that I take no responsibility for because I have zero talent in this aspect. Our beautiful marketing team have done this up. So we're going to leave them at the front desk. So when you hand back your lanyards, if you can, please, we'd love to hear your story. Even if your child isn't in that age bracket anymore, you had a child once, what would it have looked like for you? Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
I agree with you. With the exclusion, I did that years ago and what battle that was.
Oh.
It did give me a set of hands
In the childcare.
Sorry. But yeah, it did give me a set of hands. But in the end, my son had a meltdown and got fired from the daycare.
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
got thrown out at 15 years old. So, yeah, what do we do now? So he's now 17, but the point is we've had 2 years
in an after-school
in
care
vacation care. And so basically it stops you from working, it stops you from everything. But, yeah, when he was little, same deal. He went through all this.
I'm really sorry that happened. And I think maybe take solace in the fact that you're not alone. There are so many people like you that really struggle. Even now, like you said, your son is 17, but 15-year-olds should be able to go into supported care. Oh. It's a right and we deserve that and our kids deserve it. And we deserve the opportunity to come to things like this and have our children adequately supported and looked after.
The problem is if I leave him at home by himself without his brother, I'll come home to a house burnt down.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
There is 2,700 children under 5 with severe medical condition in Western Australia. There's 2,700 children that cannot attend daycare. There's just those children. It could be way more.
Just repeat the statistic, Claire.
There is around 2,700 children in Western Australia that live with severe medical condition or disability that cannot attend daycares. And obviously that does not include other children with mild disabilities that just are immunocompromised or just cannot attend daycare due to just inclusion behaviour.
It's a pretty high number and it's about time the government started to pay attention. I think there's a question here, but then I'd love to hear your question.
Yes, we have some online questions that have come through. The first of them is, why can the child with a disability not attend daycare or childcare as well?
Yep, and like I said, so many children that are falling through the gaps right now should be able to. And it's kind of a dual answer. So many of these children could definitely integrate into a mainstream centre if the centre was willing to take them, if they made allowances, if they were adequately trained, if they knew how to deal with that child, and if they actually communicated with that family and they made inclusion a priority and an actual real thing as opposed to just a tokenistic, we're inclusive. No, actually being inclusive means taking action to include that child in a very meaningful way. But then there are those children, and it is a much smaller minority group that are immunocompromised, that cannot go in I don't know about you guys, but I pick up my 2-year-old and every single child has snot on their face and every single child has a cough. And there are kids that simply could never, ever integrate into a centre like that. And some of these kids as well also have highly profound medical needs as part of their disability. And those children need support work from a staff that has medical training and medical professional background. And that just doesn't exist in the childcare centre at the moment. So hopefully that answers their question.
Thank you. And the second question was, should childcare have the same obligation as school for the inclusion of children with disability?
Absolutely. And that's one of the devastating things, and that these 0 to 5-year-old kids are not being captured. At the moment, what the system says is before your child turns 5, see you later, you're on your own, and we'll see you when they get to an adequate age. And all of a sudden your child turns 5 and hey, they can go to a supported education centre. They have all of those things that they need. The school's happy to work with your therapists. But if your child is under 5, there's nothing. There's no viable alternative there, and it just simply doesn't exist. So yeah, it should, to answer that question.
We just have time for one more question.
Just wondering what, like with the childcares.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter and my son's already out of the childcare, but it's like when they get the children there, the mainstream and non-mainstream, some people don't understand our child, and they actually put them as behaviour problems.
Sure.
And
Yes.
then there's that behaviour problems. No, she's not a risk to the world. It's just her problems.
She's just being herself.
Yeah, being herself.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but children are naughty. My children are both naughty. It doesn't matter if they have a diagnosis or not. To answer that, yeah, you're right. There is a massive lack of understanding in this space, and that goes across the spectrum. But why shouldn't we start here? It's early childhood intervention. If we change these kids' perception, if we change their opportunities and they actually live in this integrated community where real inclusivity happens, we're not going to have these issues as adults. We won't be having these conversations if we start here. If we actually start with meaningful inclusion at an early age, then what are the repercussions for that later in life? It looks like a much more beautiful future. So you're right. Even these children that are being able to integrate, there's a massive lack of understanding. Please be part of our study, because that's part of that is upskilling and training the existing systems that are already in place so that they can better provide services to children like your daughter. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Monique, and thank you for all that you're doing to create change.